Hello and welcome back to my review of OneReason's apologetics booklet, The Eternal Challenge, A Journey Through the Miraculous Qur'an. Today we'll be taking a look at the chapters, Stories of the Prophets and Past Nations, and the Hereafter. So let's get started. The Qur'an informs us that every nation on earth has, at some point in its history, been sent a messenger by God. We sent a messenger to every community, saying, worship God and shun false gods. This shows us that messengers play an important role in revelation. Every messenger sent by God to mankind, from the very first prophet Adam all the way to the final prophet Muhammad, came with the same core message of monotheism. Worship the one true God, our Creator, and not false gods. Except that's completely false by all historical records. Many nations received no such prophets arguing for one God, let alone one which could be construed as yours by some other name. And then we have entire cultures who had no prophets, period, and therefore had not heard of deities until the missionaries plagued their lands. But it cannot be referring to said missionaries, as it is talking in the past tense, and you claim this is some sort of revelation of what had previously happened up to Muhammad. If you include missionaries, you refute said claim as a self-fulfilling prophecy and nullify it as a prophecy. If you do not include missionaries, then it is simply wrong, it's lying, it's false, it's refuted there and then. So pick your poison, but don't claim something objectively false. But why did God choose to send messengers at all? Why not just drop scripture from the sky? Messengers play the crucial role of teachers. Having revelation or knowledge is one thing. We also need a teacher to provide its correct interpretation, explanation, and example in order for mankind to make use of the knowledge and implement it properly. Imagine going to a school that is without teachers, with the children just being handed the textbooks on complex subjects such as algebra. Apart from the school being a very rowdy environment, many of us would struggle to understand the information contained in the books. And yet that is a current human limitation in sharing knowledge. I say current due to the rate that neuro-augmentation is moving. Soon you may be able to download an app which lets you play the guitar or understand quantum physics. But putting that aside, an all-powerful deity should be able to distribute patchware for their defective product without needing a technician. That is an ability we, as human beings, have had for decades. Could you imagine if you needed someone from Microsoft or Apple to come and install every single update in person? That would be a pitifully poor design, which would instantaneously refute an all-powerful and all-knowing designer. Along with the stories of prophets, the Quran is filled with stories of past nations who followed, and those who refused to follow God's messengers and rebelled against God. Wait, so God sent these messengers to put a halt to disorder, and only ended up creating further disorder. I'm all for character flaws when writing fiction, but not when you are attempting to convince me of an omniscient and omnipotent deity. Who proofread this? I mean, seriously, it makes no sense. Stories are an amazing means of capturing our attention and imparting wisdom and morals when we reflect on them. There is a lesson in the stories of such people for those who understand. These stories are not in the Quran for the purpose of entertainment, but rather serve as an example to us so that we can avoid the mistakes of past nations in history. The Quran tells us that Prophet Muhammad is the last and final messenger. Muhammad is not the father of any one of you men. He is God's messenger and the seal of the prophets. If God has sent many messengers before Muhammad, then why would he stop at Muhammad? Why wouldn't God continue to send more messengers in the future? Every messenger prior to Muhammad was sent to his own people and not the whole of humanity. Prophet Muhammad is the only messenger who was sent to the whole of mankind. We have sent you, Prophet, only to bring good news and warning to all people. If Allah sent Muhammad for all of mankind, why send him just to the Middle East where his impact would be nullified by a relatively small distance? Why not wait for the golden era of exploration or until the invention of flight, the radio or television? Back then, in ignorance, this claim may have made some sense, but today it is completely asinine to suggest. Even more so when you throw in a pinch of supposed divinity. Moreover, the message of Muhammad, the Quran, represents perfection in the way of life for human beings to live. As God says, "Today I have perfected your religion for you, completed my blessing upon you, and chosen as your religion Islam." If something has been perfected, it cannot be further improved. There is no need to send any additional messengers or messages to mankind. Does that include child rape as the image of perfection? Whilst I may be applying our modern standards of what is acceptable to a historical figure, it is a figure you just asserted to be the pinnacle of perfection, and therefore could not be improved upon. I disagree. My first call would be to remove the paedophile aspect as well as removing the tyrannical warlord aspect. Muhammad was a vile beast by your own scripture. So really you need to consider that when making these claims. So that's the end of that chapter. Moving on to the hereafter. The Quran informs us that there is an existence beyond our worldly lives here on earth. Every one of us is going to die and return to God. Every soul is certain to taste death. We test you all through the bad and the good, and to us you will all return. So what is the purpose of this temporary existence here on earth? Why didn't God just create us in the eternal hereafter? We are told that we are being tested whilst we are here on earth. We shall certainly test you with fear and hunger and loss of property, lives and crops. But prophet, give good news to those who are steadfast, those who say when afflicted with calamity, we belong to God and to him we shall return. From a human point of view, usually tests are performed because the one doing the testing is trying to discover something about the one being tested. But God is not like man. God's knowledge is unlimited. God knows our innermost thoughts. Indeed, he knows us better than we know ourselves. We created man. We know what his soul whispers to him. We are closer to him than his jugular vein. Therefore, much like the earlier question of why were we created to worship God, it's more about us than it is about God. There are a number of reasons why God tests us, why he allows hardship and adversity to befall us. It is all in accordance with God's wisdom and planning, to expose those who are true believers and those who are false. Do people think they will be left alone after saying, "We believe," without being put to the test? We tested those who went before them. God will certainly mark out which ones are truthful and which ones are lying. Adversity and hardship also serves as a reminder for people who become too absorbed in the worldly life and tend to take things for granted. Given that you are holding this book in your hands, you have been blessed with the ability to read. Adversity and hardship remind us to be grateful for all of God's blessings. Whenever we are gracious to man, he goes away haughtily, but as soon as evil touches him, he turns to prolonged prayer. Because man is generally impatient and short-sighted, we may see a test in a negative light, when in actual fact it is good for us. You may dislike something, although it is good for you, or like something, although it is bad for you. God knows and you do not. Finally, it must be noted that not all adversity and hardship is from God. Some of the trials we experience are a direct result of our own actions. For example, if someone drinks a lot of alcohol one night, they would expect to have a hangover in the morning. Whatever misfortune befalls you, people, it is because of what your own hands have done. God forgives much. As you can see, the tests of this world are primarily for the spiritual growth of human beings. Just as intense fire separates pure gold from the rough ore to which it is bound in nature, tests purify our souls if we are sincere. And yet this does not address the point at all. Why run the test if he knows the end yet has no need for it? Why run a test to purify us if he could just create us in pure form? When a human compiles a test, it is to serve a purpose. It is because there is a need, and where there is a need, there is an absence of power. You can't just assert Allah has no need and then describe him, portraying all the signs that he does. This is inconsistent character design which kills off the believability in any honest fiction, not even touching the fact that you claim this to be ultimate truth. If you bring up an objection, then answer it. Don't simply tiptoe around it. We need gold. It has value and uses, such as allowing someone to run a computer that breaks down the makeup of a virus, allowing them to come up with an effective countermeasure. The only reason we need to purify gold is because we can't create gold in its pure form without that purification process. Because we are not all powerful. If we could just create gold from matter or bring it into existence, there would be no need for this purification process. It would be a waste of time, a waste of resources, and if that gold is a living being which could be burnt for eternity if it fails because it was designed to fail, that's not just a waste of time and resources, that is completely cruel. So, do explain this. Why does that without need know of desire? All desire stems from need. So how do you explain that with Allah? You might be wondering what happens at the end of this test. What happens when our lives come to an end? Much like when we sit exams at school, our performance is evaluated and we are presented with the results. In the Quran, this is referred to as the Day of Judgment. This is a momentous event in the future when the whole of mankind will be resurrected from the dead. Prophet, say, it is God who gives you life, then causes you to die, and then he gathers you all to the day of resurrection, of which there is no doubt, though most people do not comprehend. Only God knows the time of this event. People ask you about the hour. Say, God alone has knowledge of it. How could you, the Prophet, know? The hour may well be near. Every action that we perform during our lives is being recorded, and we will have to answer for everything we have said and done. On that day, people will come forward in separate groups to be shown their deeds. Whoever has done an atom's weight of good will see it, but whoever has done an atom's weight of evil will see that. In human courts, some wealthy people try to avoid justice by bribing the judge or the police. Or perhaps they can hire a skilled attorney who can get them off the hook. However, on the Day of Judgment, there will simply be no escaping God's justice. Those who disbelieve and die disbelievers will not be saved, even if they offer enough gold to fill the entire earth. And yet, there are countless who do not know of him or believe him but are ultimately good people. And yet none of that will matter. For them it is eternal pain, eternal torture. Meanwhile, the man who has always treated others with cruelty, they gain paradise for a bedside conversion. And yet you don't believe that to be a corrupt system. What a backwards mentality you hold there. Perhaps you are wondering if ultimately we are destined for the hereafter. Then what is the point of this life? Why not just skip this life and take us straight to the Day of Judgment? Let's think about an example in our world. Can you imagine if you went to sleep and woke up to find yourself in a courtroom accused of a crime you have no memory of committing? We would surely all protest at this and defend ourselves by saying we are innocent of such crimes. By living and experiencing our earthly lives here, when it comes to the day of judgment, we will recall all the deeds that we have to answer for and will have no excuse before God. We will feel no sense of injustice because God sent us His messengers and we were given the Qur'an as guidance. We will have no one to blame on that day except for ourselves. Actually, you will. You will have Allah to blame for the very makeup of who you are, which, along with your socio-economic background, ultimately dictated how your life would turn out. Therefore, to punish people for falling when they were never held is vile, a sadistic deed not worth worship, but reprehension. You describe a sick God creating sick people, placing them in a sick world, only to blame those who could not heal due to an absence of care for themselves being sick. How does that work? But you still think you have some ground to discuss the ethics. Absolutely disgraceful. Now you may say that judgment is part of humanity. Yes, fallible people judge. Why? Well, because we don't have the absolute power to help people. Punishments are dealt out of necessity, not desire, nor cruelty. Nothing will come from eternal torture, but pain. And yet you talk of love. The day of judgment is just a means. It's not an end. Like with any trial, there is an outcome. Judgment will be passed on us by God. Those who believed in God and submitted to Him by following His guidance will be rewarded with eternal bliss in paradise, while those who believe and do good deeds will be the inhabitants of the garden, there to remain. For those who chose to reject God and His guidance, there is terrible punishment in store, and for those who disbelieve in their God is the punishment of hell, and wretched is the destination. We have a choice to embrace God's eternal, unbounded mercy, or to run away from it. Accepting His mercy by responding to His message and obeying, worshipping, and loving Him will facilitate our eternal happiness in paradise. Rejecting and running away from God's mercy will ultimately lead to spending eternity in a place devoid of His love, a place of unhappiness, hell. Remember, we have a choice. We decide to embrace His mercy or to escape. We have the free will to choose. The choices we make in this life will shape our fates in the eternal hereafter. You might find all this talk of tests, the day of judgment, and paradise and hell overwhelming, but what we must all remember is that God is the most compassionate and most merciful. He has made it easy for us to be successful in the hereafter, if we truly want to. Right, except this then fails to explain the vast majority of people alive, or who have ever lived, and why they failed the test. So many people, some of them even great and caring, with unparalleled acts of human kindness. But even forgetting the truly awe-inspiring, for each one of them there are countless perfectly decent people who will be tortured for eternity for something they could not help. Many of these people will never have heard the Quran or Muhammad. Some didn't have belief in any gods because they were never raised as so. Others simply did not find the scientific illiteracy of the Quran compelling enough to dedicate their lives to a book clearly lacking in divine or empathetic origin. You say one thing, and yet reality shows another. Now, this chapter is about to fire out a rapid string of assertions which are each deserving of time to address. So we will stop here and continue with the chapter in the next episode. So I'll see you then.